Hey guys, welcome back. This is one of my favorite videos to make. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm going to dive right in. This is my successfully pollinated inflow on my Anthurium Brielle by Michelle Block hybrid. It was successfully pollinated using pollen from my Anthurium clarinivium. The berries are ready to be harvested, and I did not want to waste this opportunity to show you guys step by step how I grow from seed to mature plants. If you're curious about the pollination process, I'll link this video below for y'all so you can actually see how I pollinated this plant myself. On screen right now is proof of a successfully pollinated inflorescence. At this point, you're going to see bulges on your inflow, and it'll now be termed an infructescence because it's producing berries. This is a close-up of the mother plant. It's my Anthurium Brielle by Michelle. It's a block hybrid. How I know when it's time to harvest these berries is when they actually start popping out of the infructescence, just like this. After harvesting the berries, I place them on a paper towel and begin popping them to reveal the seeds. The number of seeds in a berry varies from berry to berry. For example, that first berry contained 2 seeds. However, this one contained 1, followed by this one, which only had 1 also. I'm not sure what governs the number of seeds in a berry. If you do know, you can comment below and let us know. But one berry doesn't always equate to 1 seed. You can have multiple seeds in one berry so that your yield can be greater than the number of berries that you harvested. My first propagation tip is to take your seeds and place them in a cup or a jar of water just like this for 24 hours before setting them to germinate. After the soak, they sometimes appear more full or plump, and I find this speeds up the germination process. So basically, they sprout a lot faster. How I prepare them for germination is by grabbing one of my seed trays, sterilizing it first with rubbing alcohol, and then placing it in a propagation dome to ensure that I have at least 80% humidity. Next, I just grab some moss and I moisten it. So basically, I run water through it to make sure it's evenly moist or wet, and then I squeeze any excess water out and make sure nothing is dripping when I squeeze the moss to make sure that it's just moistened, not waterlogged. After that, I just begin plugging each cavity with the moss. Placing the seeds atop of a moist, airy substrate where they can stay humid but not waterlogged is key to increase your success rate. In the long run, healthy plants come from healthy seeds. Once the seed tray is prepped, I then start adding my seeds. As mentioned before, everything begins with the seeds. Anthurium seeds specifically are quite different from many other houseplants because they don't store well and need to be planted quickly after harvest. The propagation dome that I'm using is one that I've reached for time and time again, but you can create chambers using plastic containers or glass cloches, anything that can maintain a humidity of 80 to 100% I'd recommend. Humidity is that one magical component that I will not compromise on. That is what governs how high or low your success rate is after setting your seeds. The process that I'm demonstrating here, as well as the setup, really lowers your risk of your seeds rotting. In most recent times, I only put 1 seed in each cavity. Before, I used to put multiple seeds, and before I would use propagation chambers like a plastic container and just space the seeds 1 inch apart, but that has proven to be very tedious in the long run. Let me show you what I mean. In my previous Anthurium seed propagation video, I showed you all how I germinated my Anthurium Ace of Spades hybrid. That's this Anthurium. It got open pollinated and I successfully sprouted the seeds. This was the first time I tried growing Anthurium from seed. And common practice at the time was just grabbing a clear container, adding a layer of moss and placing those seeds atop of the moss 1 inch apart. It gets the job done, but here's the problem. When your seeds sprout and they start growing, the roots start growing alongside each other and it gets super tangled and there is a ton of root breakage and loss. It really is painful to extract all of these individually from just one mass layer of moss as opposed to having them in their own individual pots. So we live and we learn. For seeds in this sort of quantity, I do not recommend this method. I encourage you to plant them individually from the start. If you have a much smaller number of seeds to set, for example, 5 to 10 seeds, I would say, for example, here up on screen is my Anthurium pterodactyl hybrid seeds that are germinating fine in a very small glass cloche. I don't think you'd have much headache when the seeds sprout to extract them. Side note here is just a look at the mother plant for those seeds so you can have a better idea of what the mature form of that Anthurium would look like. And this is some present day footage of those seeds really increasing in size and really growing nicely in this setup. And guess what? We're going to pot them up today just a little later on in this video. Okay, so back to our seed tray setup now. So this is what I recommend for large quantities. As time goes by and more berries pop, I'm just going to continue to fill out the seed tray. So what I'm going to do is find a spot for my propagation dome. So I just walked you guys into the greenhouse and I'm thinking, where am I going to find the space? Here is what the final setup will look like, but let's not jump ahead too much. But you can see that I really use these propagation domes frequently. And I think what I'm going to do is clear one of the shelves in my propagation area, which is this area here. And I'm just going to place it on the last shelf. Here is another dome that I have props in. So here's where we're going to set up for now. The final step in setting up your seeds is just to add your propagation dome cover. This setup not only provides the perfect environment for germination, but it also protects them from pests or predators like lizards that love to eat seeds. Once the seedlings begin to emerge, the goal shifts from germination to stability. That's why I love these domes. There are also these little holes to the top that you can open like this to encourage airflow to prevent fungal issues. By the way, these are the seeds that we popped out that I'm going to leave for 24 hours to soak. In the meanwhile, we're going to move on to potting up my pterodactyl hybrid seeds that are ready to be placed in soil. This stage is where many growers lose plants, but if the environment is stable, they can establish very quickly, and I'm going to show you how to buffer your seedlings from any sort of shock when it's time to remove them from their propagation chambers. This is just a quick look again at the mother plant so you have an idea of the potential for these seedlings. So let me get these onto my potting station, onto my potting table, and we're going to take a look at these roots together. In preparation to pot these up with you guys, I'm going to grab my Anthurium mix that I'll go through with you all in detail later in the video. For now, I want to get a better look at these seedlings. We're just going to remove 3. Those will be these 3, the largest ones. Those actually have a second leaf on the way. But like I said, in a setup like this, it is tricky to remove a few of the seedlings as opposed to removing all at once because some of the roots well, most of the times the roots get tangled. Let me give you all a bottom view. This is a great thing about using a clear container to propagate in. We can see the roots. So what I'm doing is I'm going to remove some of the moss in the area that we saw the roots growing at the bottom. And most of the time, these roots adhere to the base of your propagation container, or in this case, my cloche. So I have to gently just pull back the moss without breaking these roots. Signs that my sprouted seedlings are ready for soil is when I see multiple leaves, 2 or 3 leaves. I also check the bottoms of my clear containers like I did just now with you all to see what exactly the root network is looking like. Once it looks fairly stable, at least 2 inches long, that's also an indicator that I look for to tell me that my seedlings are ready for soil. Potting up at this stage prevents competition between the seedlings. Competition for nutrition and space primarily. Now, if your seedlings were in the seed tray, you wouldn't have these problems. I was able to free this one, so I think it should come out easier now. Okay, I want to try and give you all a better view of these roots, how they really just weave into each other and into the moss. It is such a good substrate to germinate your seeds in. The moss, it really ensures high humidity, which is what the seeds want. So here you can see these roots coming out like claws, but using moss has been a really good substrate for me. I don't know if you guys have germinated in anything else. I would love to know down in the comments, but I have had a great success rate using moss. what I'm trying to do is gently take out this second seedling without ripping those roots again. So I think this one is a little, there we go. So it came out a lot easier. It has multiple roots. I have this dish of water here that I'm going to just put them in so that they don't dehydrate. This one seems to have longer roots, so I'm going to have to move a lot more of the moss to get it out of the way. And finally, I got this one out. So I'm just going to put it next to the first one and see if I can get this last one out faster, hopefully. So I'm just moving the moss gently with my fingers like this, and I pull gently, and there we go. This one came out, I think, the easiest. And that's it. I'm going to leave these that only have one leaf. I am seeing a second leaf on the way, but it still is quite small, and it's no rush to pot it up right now. I don't think the roots are that long, so I'm just going to put it back. I'm going to place it exactly where it was. I try not to. This is Bink, by the way, for y'all who have been on this channel for a while. She's always in here with me, just keeping my company. But anyway, I'm just placing it back in its original location. Next to it is my Ficus petularis. That's one of the newest additions to my collection. But anyway, I digressed. What I'm doing here is removing as much of the moss as possible that is around the roots in water gently. And this is what the seedlings look like. So that's the seed. And this is the length of the roots that we're dealing with. Again, on average, about 2 inches long with multiple leaves. That's when I get them ready to go into soil. I'm going to grab some clay pots next, but I won't recommend these in Trinidad because of how hot it is. If these pots get into direct sun, for example, if I leave them out after cleaning them up, they warp and change shape. And then when I pot them up, pot plants in them, it's unbalanced. If you all have found clay pots that you can recommend, please let me know down in the comments. But anyway, let's move on to my Anthurium mix next. I'm going to give you all the recipe once we finish potting these up, and I'll actually just probably put up a reel of my Anthurium mix just to speed things up. But for now, I am just filling these pots halfway with my Anthurium mix, and I'm going to place the seedlings inside of each pot like this, where the roots have the full length to stretch, and just top it up where the seed itself is still exposed. So I'm not burying the seed, I'm setting it just as I did in moss, but I'm making sure that the roots are completely covered. So this one is all done. I'm going to set it aside and get the other two in. This is the second one. You can see how warped this pot is, and this is the third one. I'm going to clean these up next. Here is my handheld electric sprayer. I go on and on about this tool in all my plant shows videos, and I'm so excited to see that it's available locally now at Centriscape. For my international viewers, I got this one on Amazon, and that'll also be linked below. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting all the excess soil off of the leaves primarily to make sure that I'm not encouraging any sort of stem rot or leaf rot or fungal infection. So I make sure that these leaves are clean before I take them back into the greenhouse. And now they won't be going into the cloche. They're going to just stay in the greenhouse as is, but I'm going to place them just in front of where they sprouted, in front of the cloche, just on this level of my propagation shelf. As promised, I'm going to share my Anthurium mix that I mix myself, but I'm so excited to announce that I have found a ready-to-go Anthurium mix that I'm going to reveal later on in this video. I want to give you all an update of having tested it over, I would say, about 4 or 5 months. And these are my Vitrifolium seedlings that are ready to be potted up. So we're going to upsize those. And this was topped off with that premix I mentioned. Okay, so before we upsize my Anthurium vitrifoliums, which I also grew from seed, let's take a look at my Anthurium mix. This is a mix that I make myself that is conducive to where I grow my plants, which is in a greenhouse. You need to bear this in mind, is my biggest recommendation. Think about your environment. Are you growing in a greenhouse? Are you growing outdoors? Are you growing inside of your home? all these things play a major role in your soil mix. At the end of the day, you want a soil mix for your anthuriums that remain moist and keep your plants well hydrated, not a waterlogged mix or one that severely dries out. So let's get into the different amendments. This is tree fern fiber that's up on the screen. I use that as well as a nutrient-rich aroid mix. I get that from Utopia Gardens. I use horticultural charcoal in chunks as well as large grade perlite and orchid bark. Where I get everything will be in the description down below. I will mention though that the large grade perlite, which I find very hard to source locally, I get it from the succulent source, which is now located in Arangwes on the same compound as Home and Garden. In terms of quantities, I just eyeball it, but I did use half bag of Utopia soil hair and equal quantities of large grade perlite and orchid bark, and probably the same amount of tree fern and a little less horticultural charcoal. I hope the photo helps. So this is the Anthurium mix that I've been using for the length and breadth of my hobby. That's over 5 years. Why this mix works for me is because it is quite airy and maintains a high humidity in the soil itself because of the amount of air pockets that's in the soil. So I grow my anthuriums in a greenhouse which already has between 60 to 80% humidity the majority of the time. So my plants remain well hydrated. My roots remain hydrated as well as they receive sufficient oxygen because my mix is very chunky and airy. All in all, my anthuriums are not sitting in waterlogged soil or are they drying out severely. These are just the conditions that I grow my plants in. If this feels intimidating or just too time consuming for you, I finally have a ready to go Anthurium mix that I'll reveal later in this video. But for now, I'm going to pot up my Vitrifolium seedlings in my custom mix, but you can look forward to that soil mix reveal later in the video. Okay, so with respect to my Anthurium vitrifolium, these are growing in soil in the same seed tray that makes it so easy to just pop them out individually. I don't have any root untangling to do, but I am still very careful when taking them out. Sometimes, like I said, these roots stick to the nursery pots and they rip off. And the way this is going, I feel I'm going to have some root loss. Okay, so I'm gently squeezing and pulling, and unfortunately, I had some root loss here with this one, but I still have a significant amount of roots, so I'm satisfied with that. I'm just peeping at the bottom to see if there are any roots poking out, but there weren't, and I'm just going to set this into the pot just like this in the middle, ensuring that it's not buried too low and not too high above the pot, but just like this. So I just fast track you guys and potted those up off camera. I'm going to leave this one behind because I don't think it's large enough. It can stay in here for a couple of weeks more. And I'm just going to place this one back into the greenhouse where it was originally growing happily, which is on my propagation shelf just here next to the other seedlings. This is the mother plant, by the way. It's my variegated vitrifolium. The variegation is along the veins. It's not splashy or sectoral, and that was the type of variegation I chose when I chose to grow that one from seed. Well, I bought it as a seedling, sorry. And this is the original Anthurium vitrifolium. Since I moved it into the greenhouse, into the 70% shaded area, it has started growing these dark leaves for me. At my old residence, it received morning light, direct morning light, and you can see by the leaves next to it that those were a brighter green. So if you want your Anthurium vitrifolium to darken up a bit, try growing it in a shadier spot. This is one of my largest anthuriums. Don't forget, later on in the video, I'm going to repot one of my rare anthuriums with you guys. That's my Anthurium Zara F4. And I'm going to wrap up here with these seedlings. I've placed them all very close to where they were originally growing, just to prevent as much environmental change as possible. And finally, what I'm going to do is water them in with none other than Great White Water. This is a mycorrhizae that helps prevent transplant shock. It also helps the plants to absorb nutrients more efficiently. So I just mix a solution based on the directions stipulated on the product itself, and I water the plants in, making sure that the roots get saturated with the myco. For my Anthurium seedlings, I forgot to mention that the signal to pot those up into a bigger pot after they've started growing in soil is when I start to see roots on the surface of the pot. So that's my indicator to upsize the pot at that point. Coming up next, I'm going to reveal that ready-to-go Anthurium mix that I've tested and found such great results over time. I'm still going to continue testing it on different Anthuriums, but if you saw my Anthurium pterodactyl repot, you know the soil I'm talking about already. In that video, I described the soil mix thoroughly. And as mentioned before, I used it on my Anthurium pterodactyl first. And interestingly, a propagation. So we're getting to really see the performance of the soil from scratch, from when there were no roots or just aerial roots. So I'm actually going to repot one of them on camera for you guys today so we can take a look at the roots together. This is the mother plant that came back beautifully in its original soil, and I have two propagations from it that are both planted in the Magnolia soil mix. So this one, the larger prop, put out that beautiful leaf, and today we're going to look at the second prop because the roots are poking out the bottom. So if you were looking for evidence on the performance of the Magnolia soil mix, it does not get better than this. If the roots are already poking out the bottom, imagine what is inside of the pot. But hang in there, I'm going to repot it with you guys next. Okay, I'm going to sit you guys down here so you have a proper view of when I pull plant out of the pot. So what I'm doing is removing my configurable stackable stake that I use frequently for new propagations to lend support so it doesn't flop over. It also is stackable, so it grows with the plant, so it helps with petiole management and when I'm displaying my plants also. So there are a bunch of roots poking out. I'm trying to gently squeeze the pot to pull the plant out. That is a great sign because it means there are a lot of roots. Take a look at this root ball. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Healthy roots. I don't see any rotting happening there, and they are quite abundant with a number of secondary roots. In the rescue video, when I actually took this cutting, it had very little aerial roots, and being a fresh cutting, I didn't want to smother it, so I only potted it halfway up into this 1-gallon pot. Now that it has fully established with such a great root system, I'm going to pot it back up like I normally would when I'm setting a plant into a 1-gallon pot. So what I'm doing is making sure that I cover all the roots. If there were any exposed roots or new roots emerging, I made sure to cover that. I will spin you guys around so that you could get a different view shortly. But what I'm doing is making sure it is fully covered. And there you go, this one is topped off nicely, and I'm just going to place it right back in the location that it was growing happily in. If you have any requests for me in terms of what you want me to test this Magnolia mix on, do let me know down in the comments. But in last week's video, you would have seen that I started testing it on alocasias. Let me give you guys a closer look at this propagation next. It put out multiple leaves in the Magnolia mix, and what I'm noticing here is that there's an inflow as well, and on the surface there seems to be roots poking out. While I'm at it, I'm thinking to backfill this one time so that those roots do not dehydrate. So let me just grab some more mix quickly. So I'm simply going to add the mix to the top and hopefully get this one on the way. I had lodged a rock in here to stabilize this one as well from super high winds, and it seemed to be really stuck in there, so I'm not going to try to remove it. I am sure roots have probably adhered to it. By the way, I'm just giving you a close-up of my Hoyas that are gonna be reported soon. That video is in the making. And I'm also just giving you all some additional views as I'm walking to top this one off. But coming back to that rock, I'm just going to bury it like that because I'm scared I rip any roots off. I'm sure it's going to need a repot soon, so you could look forward to that in a future video. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of my wacky experiments. This is a close-up of the inflow. This one should be a lot happier now. I just want to give you all a close-up of a moss collar that I placed on my Anthuriums that have gotten really tall to encourage aerial root growth and then eventually soil roots. Before I get to my Anthurium Zara F4 repot, I'm going to repot my King of Spades with you all next. I bought this plant when I was at the old residence, so it has been acclimating over a period of 6 to 8 months, and I'm so happy to see that it has outgrown the spot. I have roots poking out from the surface. That is my telltale sign that my plant is ready to be repotted. So I'm going to take you guys along for this. So I'm using my custom mixer because am not familiar with my Anthurium King of Spades as I would like to be to see, I am confident enough to experiment with it. I think I still have a lot to learn about this plant, so I'm just going to get it into my custom Anthurium mix. And side note, I'm gonna try the Magnolia mix on a velvet Anthurium next. Let me know what you think. Okay, I'm gonna get this one out of the pot next. There weren't much roots coming out at the bottom, but there are a ton in here. I'm so happy to see these are super healthy because I don't. This one likes to stay on the drier side. I think I'm gonna just loosen this root ball a bit. I don't usually do this, but because my King of Spades likes to stay on the drier side, I do not want to pot it in a pot too big. So I just loosen the root ball a bit, and I'm going to pot it up in this size pot where it's really just an inch from the rim. This buffers me as an overwaterer, and I recommend always going a size smaller with your pot if you are an overwaterer. Here's a little trick because these roots are very spidery. I just place that coca coir on top to keep it down. The final thing I do is make sure that it is properly covered on the top, and I'm just going to place it right back in the location it was growing in. I have not learned much about the King of Spades over this time. It has put out about 3 or 4 leaves for me, but there's still a lot to learn before I can recommend anything. So far, I find it likes to stay on the drier side, but it is a bit of an unknown one in my collection still. So as I learn about it, I'll be sure to share what my findings are. As usual, I'm watering this hair with my great white water as per the instructions. Again, I don't mix matters with trying to prevent trauma and making sure that the plants are set up for efficient nutrient uptake. My primary goal since I've gotten the King of Spades was to really just stabilize it in my environment. And because I was moving homes, I knew it would have been subjected to a lot of changes. So I was just really trying to keep it alive. And finally, we're going to repot my Anthurium Zara F4. This is a dock block hybrid that has seen better days. It is a hot mess right now, and I'm going to explain why. If you watched this video, then you already know that I successfully pollinated my Anthurium Zara F4 with Anthurium fingers and got a ton of seedlings. After reproduction, Anthuriums really do take a hit, and my Zara F4 was no different. In addition to this, though, I also moved homes, so this plant has been completely stressed out. Okay, so let's repot her together and take a look at what's going on inside of this pot while I share some tips about mature Anthurium care. Firstly, I love top dressing with moss because it just encourages further root growth from the time aerials start to grow. So the more roots we have, the better chance the plant has at nourishing itself and sustaining large leaves. Once anthuriums reach maturity, the care routine becomes slightly different. At this stage, it's all about maintaining root health, providing stable humidity, and ensuring the plant has space to grow, especially the Zara F4 because it is a massive plant. Once it becomes mature, it can span like I would say 5 to 6 feet wide. The leaves themselves, so far in my care, have grown as large as 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide, and it just keeps increasing in size with every new leaf. The risk of waiting too long to repot, like what I did here, is that the roots that have grown into the moss become very difficult to dislodge from the moss because they become one basically. I just showed you all a close up of some pink roots that I had no choice but to rip off. And what I'm doing as I'm clearing off the moss is just removing any dead decaying matter or any old stems from past leaves. The pot I'm going to repot it into is this one here on the side. It is I mean, it looks kind of big there, but in reality, it's not that much. I'm not really going much taller than the pot that it's in. I'm just going wider, and that's because I don't have a taller pot. If I had a bigger pot, I would have put this in a bigger one. But I'm just gonna move ahead and get this one out of here because it's screaming for a repot. If you noticed, well, if you've been paying attention, you would know that I keep repeating over and over that these Anthurium roots love to adhere to the pots. So I know I'm gonna get a fight again here. If you watch my Monstera video, it is the same thing again. When you wait too long to repot, these roots just get too comfortable in here. And finally, I actually fast track Yola. When I said finally there, it actually took me like probably 8 minutes squeezing, and I even broke the pot on the rim itself. But long and short, we are here, and these are the roots. This was worth all the effort. So even though it's a hot mess above soil, it is pure perfection in my eyes anyway below. So here is what it's going to look like in its new pot, just so that you have a better appreciation of the space around the root ball itself. And it's going to be sufficient for now. I'm happy to see that there's a new leaf on the way, even though I've been mistreating it. This is why I love my dock block hybrids. They really are resilient plants. I'm using my custom mixer to repot it into because I have not, like I mentioned before, I have not tested the Magnolia mixer on the Velvet Anthuriums yet, but I'll be sure to keep you all posted. At this point, I am just backfilling and ensuring that I put at least 2 inches of soil on the bottom so that the roots have something to grow into downward, not only on the sides, because this is a wider pot as opposed to a taller pot. Over time, I've learned that success with Anthuriums isn't about a single trick. It's about consistency, observation, and creating the right environment. And once you understand how these plants grow, they can become some of the most rewarding plants in a collection. That was an open wound from removing the remainders of an older leaf that I placed a cinnamon powder on to prevent a bacterial infection. What I'm doing next is just topping off and backfilling with my Anthurium mix, and this is what it looks like in the end. If you do decide to give my custom Anthurium mix a try, please let me know how it goes. And if you do pick up a bag of the Magnolia mix, I would love to know your reviews as well. And finally, what I'm going to do here is water with the Great White Water. Again, this one is going to take a lot of water because the root ball was quite dry. So I'm going to make sure and drench this till water comes out at the bottom. And that's pretty much it for this video. If you found this guide helpful, let me know in the comments, and let me know what stage of Anthurium growing you're currently working on. And if you enjoy learning about rare plants and growing techniques, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next experiment.